this video, we are going to discuss a question paper for the IB from the IB board examination. This is the examination code. It's from higher level paper 2. So let's see the first question. You may pause the video for a while and read the question. So now let's start the discussion with part A. 3.26 grams of iron powder are added to 80 centimeter cube of 0.2 moles per decimeter cube of copper 2 sulfate solution. The following reaction occurs. Iron and copper sulfate reacts to give ferrous sulfate and copper. We are asked to determine the limiting reagent with the working, and after that we are asked to find out the copper that is obtained as the product. Thereafter, we have been asked to calculate what is the percentage yield of copper. And for that, we have been given the information that when the experiment was conducted, 0.872 grams of copper was obtained. So now let's try to understand the question once again with the help of diagram. Now let's try to understand this question with the help of images. So let's assume that this is the iron that we are going to use for the experiment. So from this iron powder, just 3.26 grams of it will be taken. And this is the copper sulfate solution. So from this copper sulfate solution, just 80 centimeter cube of it will be taken. And the concentration of this is 0.2 molar, meaning 0.2 moles in 1 dm cube. This is the concentration. So in the experiment, what will be happening is, if we are mixing this iron into copper sulfate, so in the experiment, what happens is, when we add iron to the copper sulfate solution, what happens is a reaction will be happening, a displacement reaction will be happening. We know that iron is above copper in the metal reactivity series. So obviously, iron is going to displace copper ions from the copper sulfate solution, because Fe is more reactive than copper. So the displacement reaction will be iron plus CuSO4 gives FeSO4 plus Cu. This FeSO4, what is formed, will be in the solution, that will be soluble, so it remains in the solution. But the copper, what is formed as a precipitate, so this copper is actually separated by filtration. It is dried and weighed. After filtration and purification, we have been told that it is 0.872 grams of copper that is obtained. So yeah, this is the experimental portion. Now let's try to understand how to solve this question. So in order to solve the question, let's first find out how many moles of iron is there and how many moles of copper is there. Sorry, copper sulfate is there. So in order to find the moles of iron, number of moles will be equal to mass over atomic mass of iron. Mass is given as 3.26 and atomic mass of iron, this is the grams. Atomic mass of iron will be 55.85 grams per mole. So when I'm calculating, this grams and grams gets cancelled out. Moles goes to the numerator. So I'll be getting 0.0583 moles. Now we need to find out how many moles of copper sulfate is there. For that, we will be using the formula for molarity, and the formula is concentration is equal to number of moles over volume of solution in dm cube. Just to be careful, it's not in centimeter cube, we want it in dm cube. So the concentration is given here, that is 0.2, which will be equal to number of moles. We don't know how much it is. That's what our aim is, to calculate that. And 80 centimeter cube will be 0.08 decimeter cube. So when I'm cross multiplying, I'll be getting this as 0.2 times 0.08, this will be 0.016 moles. So we've got the moles of iron, we've got the moles of copper sulfate. So our next task is to find out which is the limiting reagent. In order to find which is the limiting reagent, let's take the ratio between these two. So the ratio goes like, let's take it like this. Iron is to copper sulfate. And for that, for this calculation, we need the balanced chemical equation. So I'm just rewriting the balanced chemical equation once again. It will be Fe plus CuSO4 gives FeSO4 plus copper sulfate. And it goes in the ratio 1:1. So 1:1 is the ratio of copper is to iron sulfate. This I'm getting it from the balanced chemical equation. Now, in order to find out which is the limiting reagent, I'll be utilizing the moles of iron and moles of copper, what I've got. So the moles of iron is 0.0583. Let's assume that this is set for X. So what happens? When I'm cross multiplying, I'll be getting 1 times X is equal to 0.0583 times 1, or I'll be getting X is equal to 0.0583. So means if I'm having 0.0853 moles of iron, I'll be requiring exactly the same quantity of copper sulfate. So many moles of copper sulfate itself. But if you're analyzing the data that we had calculated before, we are finding that the copper sulfate is 0.016 that we have in the solution what we are using. Meaning copper sulfate is not as much as we are expecting. Or in other words, copper sulfate being not in sufficient quantity, that is the limiting reagent. It is just 0.16. So this is the limiting reagent. So our first part of the question is solved. Determine the limiting reagent with working. So that part is solved. Now let's move on to the next part of the question. The mass of copper sulfate obtained experimentally was 0.872. Calculate the percentage yield. So now let's go for calculating that. So yeah, this is what I told. We have at the end of the experiment, after drying, after filtration and drying of the precipitate, we are getting 0.872 grams of copper. So we are asked to calculate what is the percentage yield. For that, we have to depend on the formula. Percentage yield is equal to actual yield over theoretical yield times 100. This is our actual yield. Theoretical yield is still unknown to us. Or in other words, I can just rewrite this as percentage yield is equal to 0.872 over theoretical. We don't know how much it is times 100. Now let's try solving out how much is the theoretical yield and then come back to this section once again. So in order to calculate how much is the theoretical yield, we have already found that copper sulfate is the limiting reagent, and the amount of copper sulfate that we had calculated previously was 0.016 moles. So now this time we have to take the ratio between copper sulfate and copper. This again is 1:1. So copper sulfate is to copper. As per the balanced equation, it is 1 copper sulfate that is giving me 1 copper, 1 mole of copper. So 1:1, Or in other words, if I'm having 0.016 moles of copper, this would be X, or this X, just because it is 1:1 ratio, this X will be obviously equal to 0.016 moles itself. So we have got the moles of copper, which is same as moles of copper sulfate. Now our next aim is to find out the mass of copper. So in order to find the mass of copper, what we will be doing is number of moles will be equal to mass over atomic mass of copper. So number of moles is 0.016 is equal to mass is what we are supposed to calculate, that is unknown to us, over the atomic mass of copper is 63.55. 63.55. So what happens? This mass will be equal to 1 point. When I'm cross multiplying, I just need to multiply 0.1016 times 63.55. So when I'm cross multiplying, M is equal to 0.016 times 63.55. I'll be getting the mass equal to 1.02 grams. So now my theoretical yield is ready. Theoretical yield means how much I'm getting when I'm calculating it theoretically, not when I'm getting when I'm doing the experiment, but what I'm getting when I'm doing the calculation based on the stoichiometric balanced chemical equation, based on the stoichiometry of the balanced chemical equation, when I'm calculating what is the data I'm getting. That is theoretical yield. So that is going to be 1.02. So when I'm calculating this, my answer is going to be 85.5%. So this is our marking scheme. So the first part of A part of question number 1 from this paper is done. Next, we have to move to the B part.
You may please pause the video and read through the question. So now I'll explain to you what is said here. The reaction was carried out in a calorimeter. The maximum temperature rise of the solution was 7.5 degrees Celsius. Calculate the enthalpy change of the reaction in kilojoules. It is asking us to calculate the enthalpy change in kilojoules. Assuming that all the heat released is absorbed by the solution. So actually here we are making an assumption that the complete heat energy released during the reaction is absorbed by the solution only. It is absorbed by the calorimeter, what we are using, or the thermometer or the stirrer inside it. So that is an assumption that we are making here. So now let's see how to work this out. For a quick recap, (3.6 grams of iron is actually made to react with 80 centimeter cube. Only 80 centimeter cube of copper sulfate solution is being used. This solution is having a concentration of 0.2 molar or moles per decimeter cube. So again, 3.6 grams of iron is allowed to react with just 80 centimeter cube of 0.2 molar copper sulfate, and the reaction is carried out in a calorimeter like this. So this thermometer provided here helps us to notice the rise in temperature or the fall in temperature, what is happening to the system. And the stirrer here helps in stirring the solution for getting a uniform temperature rise, or to make the temperature distribution uniform, we are providing the stirrer. Otherwise, there will be error in the temperature measurements that is made. So we can assume that this iron, what we are having here, is added into the calorimeter, and 80 centimeter cube of this solution is added into it, and this is an exothermic reaction, so there will be a rise in temperature. See, in the question, it is highlighted, heat is released. So we need not have to have a confusion like whether heat is released or absorbed, question is clearly indicating there is a rise in temperature because it is already said that the heat is released and temperature rise is also indicated in the question itself. So we need not have to have a second thought like whether it is exothermic or endothermic. It is exothermic only. So now let's see how to go about with the calculation. The energy to calculate the quantity of heat absorbed or released is Q is equal to mc delta T. Here m is actually the mass of the solution, and we are assuming this mass to be 80 grams itself. And this 80 grams, you might be wondering from where we are getting it. It's already stated that the solution is 80 centimeter cube of the solution is what we are using for this experiment. So assuming that the density, I'm highlighting, we are assuming that the density is equal to 1 gram per centimeter cube. We are just assuming the density of the solution to be equal to density of water. Density is 1 gram per centimeter cube, wherein we assume that density of a solution is equal to density of water. This is an assumption that is made here. From that only we are getting the mass is 80 grams. So we've got the M value. Now let's see what is C. C is actually the specific heat capacity. Here again, we are assuming that it is 4.184 or 4.18 joules per grams per degree Celsius. This is actually the specific heat capacity value for water. This is the next assumption what is made here. Assume C of water is equal to C for solution also. This is another assumption that is made in this calculation. Then the rise in temperature, that of course it is given in the question itself. It's stated that the temperature rises 7.5 degrees Celsius. So temperature rises 7.5 degrees Celsius. Now just plug in the numbers and do the calculation. So Q will be equal to mass is 80. C is 4.184 or 4.18. Temperature is 7.5. So 80 times 4.18 times 7.5, I'll be getting it as 2,508. So the unit for 80, it is grams. For this one, it is joules per grams per degree Celsius. Unit for 4.18 is joules per gram per degree Celsius. And unit for temperature is degree Celsius. This degree Celsius and degree Celsius cancels out. This cancels out. We are left with only joules. So the unit is going to be 2,508 joules, which I'm asked to write it as kilojoules. Question is specifying us to write in kilojoules. So that would be 2.508 kilojoules. Or if I'm rounding it off, I'll be getting it as 2.5 times 10 to the power 3 kilojoules. So we've got the heat that is released during this reaction, which is 2.5 times 10 to the power 3. But so now we have got that when we are having the reactant iron powder and the copper sulfate solution reacting with each other, we found that it is releasing away 2.5 kilojoules of energy. Again, I highlight in the question itself, it is clearly indicated the reaction is exothermic. So in order to indicate that exothermic behavior, I can introduce a negative sign for the heat that is released or the Q value that we have calculated just now. But our aim is to calculate the enthalpy for this reaction. And the enthalpy that is calculated is not for the given quantity of the reactants that we are using. It has to be for 1 mole of the reactants that we have to use per mole of the reactant. Here, copper sulfate is the limiting reagent. So I'm considering copper sulfate because definitely there will be excess of iron that is left unreacted. I cannot depend on iron for my calculations. I have to strictly depend on only copper sulfate. So in our previous calculation, in section 1A calculations, we had already calculated the moles of copper sulfate. I'll just show it here. Here we have already calculated for the given quantity of copper sulfate solution, we are having 0.016 moles of copper sulfate in it. So back here, Q is equal to minus 2.5 kilojoules for 0.016 moles of copper sulfate. So in order to calculate the enthalpy change, it has to be for 1 mole. So X kilojoules will be corresponding to 1 mole of copper sulfate. When I'm cross multiplying the data, I'll be getting X times 0.016 will be equal to 1 times minus 2.5. So I'll be getting X as equal to 2.5 over 0.016 gives me 156.25. Of course, the negative sign will be there. Yeah. When I'm doing a rounding off, I can round this off to 160, negative 160 kilojoules per mole. Now I'm calling it as per mole because this is for 1 mole of copper sulfate. This is going to be our answer. Instead of copper sulfate, if you're depending on copper that is formed as the product, we can utilize the moles of copper that is formed as the product as well. In that case, the value will be slightly different. So in the initial part of this section, it was already stated that it is already shown that this reaction will be producing 0.872 grams of copper. This is not the theoretically calculated value. This is the output of the experiment. At the end of the experiment, when I'm saying end of the experiment, what I mean is iron is made to react with copper sulfate solution. The precipitate of copper, what is formed, is separated out. It is washed, dried, and weighed. This quantity is 0.872. This is the actual experimental result, experimental quantity of copper sulfate. Sorry, copper that is produced in the reaction. Some of you would be using this particular value for your calculation. Now let's see what is the data that we get. What is the enthalpy value what we get if we are using 0.872 grams. So back here, the amount of heat produced in the reaction is minus 2.5 kilojoules. Minus, obviously, it is an exothermic reaction. So minus indicates that heat energy is getting released away. This much quantity of heat energy is released for 0.875 grams of copper produced. Copper produced experimentally. It's not the theoretically calculated value. So now our aim is to find out how many moles of copper has been produced. So we have to convert the mass into moles. For that, number of moles is equal to mass over atomic mass. So we get number of moles is equal to 0.875 grams over atomic mass of copper is 63.55 grams per mole. So this will be, when I'm calculating, when I'm dividing this, moles and moles goes away. Sorry, grams and grams goes away. This mole goes to the numerator, per mole goes to the numerator. And the value I get is 0.0137 moles. So many moles are there. So many moles of copper, when so many moles of copper is produced, it will be releasing minus 2.5 kilojoules of energy. So I can rewrite it as minus 2.5 kilojoules of energy corresponds to 0.0137 moles of copper. Now, if I want to get it for 1 mole of copper, because as I said before, enthalpy has to be calculated for 1 mole of the substance, not for any quantity that we utilize in the experiment. So for 1 mole of copper, let's take this as x kilojoules. When I'm solving for x through cross multiplication, I can get minus 2.5 times 1 is equal to x times 0.0137. So when I'm taking to the opposite side, I'll be getting x as equal to minus 2.5 over 0.0137. When I divide this, I'll be getting the value as minus 182.48 kilojoules. So when I'm rounding it off, kilojoules per mole. So when I round it off to two significant values, when I'm rounding it off to two significant figures, I'll be getting it as minus 180 kilojoules per mole. Now let's see the answer scheme. This is it. They've given both the ways. So one is giving us minus 1.6 that we have seen. We have also seen how we are getting minus 1.8. So here we have calculated the answer for this question. It can be either minus 160 kilojoules per mole or it can be minus 180 kilojoules per mole. Both the values have been accepted as per marking scheme. So now let's move to the next section. So now let's move to the next part of the same section. It's from B only. State another assumption you made in part 1. We have already made few assumptions. I indicated it there itself. So I'm just highlighting it once again. The density of the solution was assumed to be equal to 1.0 grams per centimeter cube, which is actually the density of water. Then the specific heat capacity of water is actually 4.184 joules per grams per degree Celsius. But here we are assuming that the specific heat capacity of solution is equal to 4.184 joules per grams per degree Celsius. These are two assumptions what we had made. Then another assumption what we made was that there is no heat loss to the calorimeter, the temperature, there's no heat loss to the calorimeter, to the thermometer, or the stirrer that we are using. So no loss of heat energy to the materials of the calorimeter. Then another assumption what we are making is that the reaction is going for completion. The complete reactant what we are using is reacting away. Completion of reaction is another assumption what we make. You can go with any of the answers choices given here. It's just for 1 mark. Any choice given here will do. So moving on to the next part, going on to the next section, the only significant uncertainty is in the temperature measurement. Determine the absolute uncertainty in the calculated value of delta H if the uncertainty in temperature rise was plus or minus 0.2 degrees Celsius. You may pause the video and read the question if you were finding it difficult to understand. We know that percentage error is equal to experimental value minus accepted value over accepted value times 100. So this is the formula to calculate percentage error. We've been already given in the question. In the question itself, it is given that the uncertainty in the value is plus or minus 0.2. So now this portion has been given in the question. It is given to be 0.2 plus or minus. Modulus will be cancelling it. Modulus will be making it positive. The modulus value will be making it positive. So we need not worry about the sign of it. By accepted value. The accepted value has been 7.5. We have been using 7.5 in our calculation. So that is the accepted value times 100. So we will be getting it as equal to 2.66%. So in this, there is only one sig fix. So I can round this off to 3%. Only one sig fix has to be retained. Significant figure has to be maintained. So I'm just rounding it off to 3%. So now the question is asking us to calculate the uncertainty in delta H, or the enthalpy of the reaction. We had got two enthalpy values. One was delta H equal to minus 160 kilojoules per mole. And the other one was delta H is equal to minus 180 kilojoules per mole. Let's see how much you will be getting the uncertainty if you're going with minus 160. Uncertainty is equal to 3% of 160. We do not have to consider the sign. So that will be 3% of 160. So that would be 3 over 100 times 160. So this will give me 3 over 100 times 160 gives me 4.8 kilojoules, which I can round it off to 5 kilojoules. Or if I'm going with minus 180 kilojoules, I'll be getting the value as uncertainty is equal to 3% of 180. So that will be 3 over 100 times 180. This will be equal to 5.47. So if I'm rounding it off, this also will be giving me 5 kilojoules. So now let's check the marking scheme. This is it. So now we shall see this particular question. Sketch a graph of concentration of iron sulfate FeSO4 against time as the reaction proceeds. Now, as a quick recap, let me highlight the reaction once again. The reaction is between iron powder, powdered iron, and copper sulfate. This copper sulfate has been calculated to be the limiting reagent. Obviously, this iron is there in excess amount. So when this reaction happens, initially iron powder was used and copper sulfate is aqueous. So as the reaction proceeds, we will be getting copper metal in iron sulfate solution, FeSO4 solution. Copper is actually formed, copper solid is formed as a precipitate in iron sulfate solution. Assume that the violet spheres here indicate iron and The green spheres indicates FeSO4. As it's clear in the diagram itself, there are few violet particles even towards the end because, as I stated before, we are having excess of iron, meaning the reaction will not, meaning complete iron particles will not be consumed in the reaction. The reaction will be stopping once the copper sulfate molecules have been completely used up by the reaction mixture. And now in this question, we have been asked to plot a graph for the reaction rate with respect to concentration of ferrous sulfate with time. For that, if you're observing this diagram, you can understand that initially there are no ferrous sulfate particles. There's not even a single ferrous sulfate particle that is there at the start of the reaction. There is only iron that is present, meaning zero number of iron sulfate molecules are there at the start of the reaction. But as the time proceeds, initially there is a lot of reactant molecules. So the collision between iron and copper sulfate would be happening tremendously fast. I'll repeat. Since there are a lot of reactant particles, the collision between iron and copper sulfate particles will be happening very fast at the start of the reaction. So the rate of production, rate at which the iron sulfate is formed also will be very high. But as time passes by, the reactant molecules, the amount of reactant molecules will cease down, the amount of reactant molecules will decrease down. Obviously, that will be reflected in the rate of production of FeSO4 as well, meaning as time passes by, the rate of reaction will slow down. I'll repeat again. Initially, the reaction rate will be really high because there are a lot of reactant molecules. As time passes by, the reactant molecules get slowly reduced. So the reaction rate also, or the production of iron sulfate also gets reduced. And once the complete copper sulfate, which is the limiting reagent, has been over, no more ferrous sulfate will be produced. So here we are making the assumption that copper sulfate, which is there as the limiting reagent, will be completely consumed. And at that point of time, the iron which is there in excess will still remain, but the production of iron sulfate will no longer happen. So now let's try to plot the graph. In the graph, they have already marked the x-axis and y-axis. X-axis is having time and y-axis is having concentration of FeSO4. So initially we said there are, as in the diagram, there are no FeSO4 molecules at the start. So this would be the starting point. So as the reaction, as time passes by, the amount of ferrous sulfate increases. It increases very fast initially, then it slows down, and then the reaction dies out at a point of time when there are no more copper sulfate molecules to undergo reaction. So this is the marking scheme. You can pause the video and have a quick look at the marking scheme. Now let's see what is the next question. So this is the next part of the question. Outline how the initial rate of the reaction can be determined from the graph in part C1. So in order to determine the initial rate of the reaction, meaning initial rate means at the start, the moment at which we are mixing the reactants. And for that, we have to draw the tangent because we know that at the very start of the reaction, the amount of product formation would be very high, but we cannot get it from this graph directly. Directly, it's not possible to get it from the graph. So in order to get the initial rate of the reaction, we have to plot a tangent. At time 0, we have to plot a tangent like this. And whenever you're plotting the tangent, make sure that we are going for the biggest possible line so as to get the most reliable data. In order to calculate the slope of this violet line, which is the tangent, I have to draw a line parallel to y-axis, and I have to take this line along the x-axis. You have to take the ratio between y on x. You'll be able to get the initial rate for this particular reaction. So drawing the tangent to this point, we'll be able to calculate the initial rate for the reaction. So let's write. Draw a tangent at time equals 0. Slope of the tangent equals the initial rate. So now let's see how the marking scheme goes. So this is the marking scheme. Coming back to the next question. Explain using collision theory why replacing iron powder with a piece of iron of same mass slows down the rate of the reaction. For that, let's try to understand it with the help of a diagram. Here, let's assume that this is a block of iron. This is an iron block. And these green particles are powdered iron. When we are using a block of iron, limited number of iron particles are only exposed to the copper sulfate molecules for collision and getting converted to product. But when I'm going with powdered iron, lot of molecules are getting exposed to copper sulfate solution. The more copper sulfate molecules will be undergoing collision with the iron particles, and hence the rate will be faster if we are going with powdered iron. Or in other words, we can say that in a block of iron, the surface area that gets exposed for the molecules to undergo collision, for the iron particles and copper sulfate particles to undergo collision is greatly less. But when we are going with powdered iron, the surface area of iron particles gets increased. When the surface area gets increased, more and more collisions will be happening between the iron and copper sulfate particles. As the number of collisions increases, the rate of reaction also will be higher. So what is it? As the surface area increases, rate of collision will be faster. Product formation also will be faster with higher surface area. Piece of iron has smaller surface area or lower surface area. So number of collisions will be less and rate of reaction slows down. Rate of reaction is slower. This is the marking scheme. This is the last section from question 1. You may read the question by pausing the video. A student electrolyzed aqueous ferrous sulfate, FeSO4 solution using platinum electrodes. State half equations for the reaction at the electrons using section 24 of the data booklet. So now section 24 from the data booklet is the standard electrode potential at 298 Kelvin. I've pasted it here on the whiteboard. As per question, it said that we are subjecting iron sulfate. It is not copper sulfate. We are subjecting iron sulfate for electrolysis using platinum electrodes. It's platinum electrodes that are used. Platinum is an inert electrode. It will not be participating in the reaction, but it will be serving as a medium for the electron transfer. It will not directly take part in the reaction. It's an inert electrode. The molecules within the electrolytic solution only will be participating in the reaction, meaning it could be either water, H plus or OH minus generated from the water molecules, or iron, Fe2 plus, or sulfate ions that will be participating in the reaction. Platinum is just an inert electrode. It will not participate in the reaction. Now, we have to know what reaction can happen at the cathode, what reaction can happen at the anode. You know that cathode undergoes, at the cathode, there is a reduction that takes place, and at the cathode, reduction happens. At the cathode, reduction happens, and reduction happens for the species with higher reduction potential. So those particles which have higher reduction potential will be getting reduced at the cathode. At the same time, those at the anode, oxidation will be happening. And as far as oxidation is concerned, the particles with lower reduction potential value will be undergoing oxidation at the anode. Now let's see which all particles can undergo, which all can be the molecules, or which all can be the reactions that can happen at the cathode, or which all can be the reactions that can happen at the anode. Fe2 plus can get converted to Fe. Its reduction potential value is minus 0.45. That is one reaction that can happen. Or water getting converted to H2 hydrogen gas and OH minus, that can happen. Or H plus getting converted to hydrogen gas, this can happen. Yeah, with sulfate, I can have this reaction. Then again, oxygen, water, OH minus, so I can have this reaction. Copper will not do. Yeah, I can have even this reaction. Or even this one also. So these are few reactions that can happen in this particular system. Now, in order to decide which will undergo oxidation, which will undergo reduction, I have stated it here clearly. The one with higher reduction potential will be undergoing reduction at the cathode, and the one with lower reduction potential will be undergoing oxidation at the anode. Now let's find out which can be the reaction at the cathode, which can be the reaction at the anode. For that, for a cathode reaction, try a reaction which is, take a species which is having higher reduction potential. So if you can observe, this is minus 0.83. This is plus 0.77. Or at the top, you have lower values. We have low values at the top, and we have higher values at the bottom. So for cathode, you may go with a bottom reaction, and for the anode, you may choose any one from the top section. So I'm going with this for the cathode, and preferably this for the anode. So at the cathode, where reduction occurs, I can directly take this reaction because this is given in reduction format, and reduction is what is happening at the cathode. So I can simply write half O2 plus 2H plus 2E gives H2O. If I'm removing this half, I'll be getting, in order to remove the half, I can multiply throughout by 2. So I'll be getting O2 plus 4H plus 4E gives 2 water molecule. So this would be my cathode reaction. And for the anode, I've decided to take a reaction from the top. I've decided to take this one from the top. So that will be in this table. But there is a problem. At the anode, it is not reduction, it is oxidation that is happening. But this equation, what is given here, is in reduction format. So what I have to do is I have to flip it over. So when I'm flipping it over, I'll be getting it as Fe solid gives Fe plus 2 aqueous plus 2 electrons. I have highlighted the anode and the cathode equation, which I've chosen from this table. Now let's see the marking scheme. You may pause the video and have a look. So many options are provided. You can choose any one. So only point what you have to note is for cathode half reaction, select one from the higher reduction potential value, and for the anode half, select one from the lower reduction potential value and flip it over. Again, remember, anode half has to be flipped over because at the anode, it is not reduction, that is instead oxidation, what is happening, loss of electron that is happening. So yeah, that's all for now in this video. Thank you.